section, everything's going to kind of come together, because in this series, we have been talking about, what it says on our money. And it says, in God we trust. But a lot of times when we think about money, no, it's not in God that we trust. What it is it's in ourselves that we trust. I'll just make sure that I earn more, or I manage it well, or, I do this, or I don't do that. But that's not it. Like, we have a responsibility, but we don't trust in ourselves. We should trust in God. We've also talked about trusting in money itself. And it's not that money is the problem. It's that the love of money is the problem. And some of us think if we just had more. And for all of us, if we just had more, we probably think things would be better. Like, if I just had more, I'd pay this off, or I'd pay that off, or I wouldn't have to worry about this, or I wouldn't have to worry about that. Typically, that doesn't seem to be the case. If you have a money management problem, more just makes it a bigger problem. And then some of us, we also think that, like we talked about last week, we trust in our methods. And so instead of our money, instead of myself, we trust in our methods. And we think, oh, well, if I just do this, and, we've got get rich quick schemes and, stuff like that, which reminds me, I told you guys last week about HQ, how I was a big winner. And can I tell it? No? Okay, I won't. So somebody else joined, Tyler and Tori joined. They won too. They won like 5 times as much as I did. And so it's a legit game. You can really play and you can really win actual money. And so again, if you want an invite, just let me know and I'll give you an invite so you can play. But that wouldn't be very nice. In Proverbs chapter 22, we haven't talked a whole lot about debt, just because I think most of us who are in debt know that it's no fun to be in debt. But in Proverbs 22, verse 7, it says this, "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." And so if you owe somebody money, whether it's for your house, maybe it's for your car, maybe it's for school, more than likely you just want to get out from under that debt because you feel like you're a bit of a slave. Because that's really what debt is. Debt is oftentimes slavery. And sometimes we have to enter into debt, but the Bible teaches us to get out of debt as quickly as we can because you don't get to really control your life while somebody else is controlling your money and telling you where you need to spend it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of walk through Proverbs 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8, the ones that we've been memorizing, tying it back to the last few weeks, because it's all about who is your master. And if you're in debt, then whoever owns all your money and that you owe, that's your master. But we're supposed to trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. We're supposed to trust in God. In God we trust. So Proverbs 3:5 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding." So what we need to do is we need to trust in the master. Now most of us, if we're in debt, we don't trust in that master. The only thing that we trust there is that they will send us a bill, that they will send us a coupon, that they will say, you need to make your payment on time or I'm taking your car. You need to make your payment or I'm taking your house. You need to make your payment or I'm garnishing your wages if you have school loans. We trust in the master. What we don't trust in, did that disappear? Did it say myself? Well, come back here. Okay, well, it'll say that. Again, like I said, we've had issues here all day. So, we trust in the master. We don't trust in ourselves. Probably going to disappear again. Yep. Bye-bye. Okay. That's cool. So let me just tell you a little story about trusting in your master. Okay? Not what other people say, not what you think, not any of those kinds of things. There's a story, I don't know the name of this guy, I don't even know if it's true, but there was a violinist, okay, and he was really, really good. And I heard that this was in the early 1900s, okay, so like 1920s, when I guess that's what people went to concerts for, to hear violinists. So This guy comes out and he plays amazingly, and everybody's just like wowed, and he walks off stage, and everybody's standing and cheering, and he comes back and he plays some more, and they're like just blown away. So everybody's standing up, and he walks off stage, and they keep cheering, and he comes back out and he plays some more. This happens like 4, 5, 6 times that this guy goes off stage, and then finally, the 7th time, comes out there, and it's, again, amazing. Like, I don't know how somebody has that many encores. It's amazing. And everybody's standing on their feet, and he just turns and he walks off the stage. And, so the crowd's in a frenzy. The people are just amazed. Like, here's a virtuoso of virtuosos. And afterwards, there was a reporter who asked him, he said, let me just kind of read this to make sure that I get the quote right. He said, why did you give so many encore performances? You could have stopped after the first and everybody would have been amazed. And so this violinist guy, he stops and he says, for the very first time in my career, my master, the one who taught me to play the violin, he was in the audience. And so when I finished my performance, everybody stood except for one person. And when I played again, everybody stood and applauded except for him. And I continued to play. And it was only at the conclusion of that last encore that I looked and I saw my master was standing and applauding, and it was only then that I was satisfied that I had done a good job. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Trust in your master with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. Anybody else would have looked around, and it didn't make sense to anybody. Why in the world is this guy who's so amazing coming back out and doing more and doing more and doing more and doing more? Many people would have thought it was because he was showing off. Maybe he wanted the accolades. Maybe he was prideful. Who knows? But he could have easily walked off and thought, I did a great job. But because he was trusting in the Lord, or the Master, he couldn't. He had to stay there until the Master was impressed. The Master recognized what he did and how he handled his gifts. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus talks, and this is one of the verses that we used before. We talked about Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. Jesus is talking, it's the Sermon on the Mount, and he says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The eye is the lamp of the body, and so if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. And if the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And then he makes this statement in verse 24, no one can serve 2 masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And so when we trust in ourselves, here's what Jesus is saying. It's not just about the money. It's about who do you love? Who are you trying to honor? And the thing he's telling us is that you only get one choice. It's not a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's not 80-20. It's not 90-10. It's either or. You can either serve God or money. You can either serve the master or you can serve yourself. And so let's look at the next couple verses, which, again, you guys have memorized. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. So he's talking about your ways, your paths, your eyes. And then he says, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. So now, instead of trusting the master, now we follow the master. In all your ways, follow the master, and he will make straight your paths if you follow the master. Be not wise in your own eyes. Follow the master. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. So we follow the master not, let's see if this works. Nope. Not my methods. Not my methods. In all your ways, acknowledge him. Just think of that statement right there. In all your ways, acknowledge him. Do you trust in your ways? or do you trust in Him, in His ways? He will make straight your path. It's your path. You can take any route you want, but do you trust in Him and acknowledge Him? Will you follow Him? So, there's this guy who got saved. We'll call him Billy. And Billy spent the first 28, 29 years of his life living it up. Okay? Let's just say he had some stories he could tell. And this was back again in the 1900s or early 1900s where guys would farm. Okay? So Billy was the guy who would go out on the town and he'd get in fights at the bar and he would drink a lot and he would steal and thieve and connive and all kinds of stuff like that. But Billy meets Jesus and things radically change. And when Billy's out just farming and he's hoeing a row of potatoes, he tells the story, he says, I felt like the devil was coming against me. He was oppressing me. And the devil said to me, he says, God doesn't love you. God doesn't love you at all. If He did, why would you have such puny potatoes? Why would you have so few potatoes? Okay, now I don't know what you're thinking. I'm thinking when I first heard this story, I'm thinking like, okay, well this is kind of interesting. Like, here's Billy, has had a heck of a life. And now he's farming potatoes and he's having a conversation, or at least he's recounting a conversation that Satan is having with him. God doesn't really love you. If He did, you wouldn't have such small, puny potatoes. Well, I don't know about you, but when God saves you, you actually need to remember the truth and not the lies. And this is what Billy did. Billy realized, okay, well that's a lie. God really does love me. And so he actually, in the middle of his garden, speaks back to the devil. And here's what he said. I served you long and true, devil, and no better servant could a master ever have been than I was to you. But when I served you, when I did it your way, you didn't give me any potatoes. When I served you, you didn't give me anything. You gave me nothing for all my efforts. These might be small potatoes, but they're more than you ever gave to me. And I got to thinking about that. Because I've listened to lies before. Where if God really loved you, this wouldn't be happening in your family. If God really loved you, your church would be bigger than it is now. If God really loved you, your finances would be in order, in a better, you wouldn't be struggling to make things work this week, or whatever. If God really loved you, then your friends wouldn't do this, or people wouldn't do that, or whatever. I've listened to those lies, and it's only when I crowd them out, not with, well, let me try this. Let me try and fix that financial problem this way. Let me try and build the church this way. Let me try and fix my kid this way. I'll try one more thing. I'll try and do one more thing. I'll try and solve one more problem, do it my way. It's never worked. The only thing that's ever worked is to remember that my ways don't actually work. Laura and I were just talking, it might have even been this morning or last night, I don't remember. But some of you know she has been, for the last year and a half or so, she's been a home hospice nurse. Which, who were we talking? Oh, we were talking to my son, who is now hanging out with a different group of people than the frat boys that he used to hang out with. And he was telling Laura, he's like, the company you keep really matters. And that got Laura to kind of thinking, the company I keep is all going to die. And that got her walking down this path going, how in the world did I ever end up in this job? Where My job is to show up to a house that I've never been to before, in a family dynamic where I've never been before, walk in and see a patient that I've never seen before, assess how they are, what they need. I'm the only nurse that they're going to see, the only medical person that they're going to see, because most of them have DNRs, and so even if they code, they don't call 911. My job's to come out there and say that they've died. Like, how did that? That's not me. I don't like new things. I don't like change. I don't like being in charge. I don't like being the only one. I hate this. But I love this job. And she was talking and she said, you know why? Because it's demonstrated to me that I can't do it. In all your ways, acknowledge him and he will make straight your paths. And so, here's my wife who quit that job now, so that she can spend more time with our family, but she wasn't able to even quit the job. Her last day is Friday before she picked up a new one, which is more part-time, and she can decide the schedule. But the people were begging her. Now, why would they beg somebody who was completely incompetent in her own mind, who was completely uncomfortable in her own mind, who was completely incapable of doing it her own way? Why would they be after, like, we really, really, really want to hire you? And so when she went in and sat down with the person at this other place, they said, well, this is going to count for our interview. I'll post the job, and then, you make sure you fill it out, and then I'll let you know that you've got it. That's how this works. Okay, I thought I was just coming in to ask you some questions, but you've already hired me. Cool. Now, I'm sure my wife hates telling this story. She's rolling her eyes right now, okay, because I've just talked about my wife and her inability, but her ability, and what it looks like to let Jesus work in you, and she hates that. She hates attention. But I can think of no better illustration in my life of somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, but knows who can help them do it. And so, as we're talking about how do we handle our finances, some of you don't know what you're doing. You think more money will solve the problem. You think, maybe I'll get a second job, or maybe I'll do this, or I'll invest here, or whatever. No. It's trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding, and then in all your ways acknowledge him. In your ways acknowledge him. He will direct your paths. He will make straight your paths. Don't try and be wise in your own eyes. And so, skip over to Romans chapter 6. In Romans chapter 6, Paul is writing to the Romans, and he's sharing some good advice. It's a really deep book. And he says this towards the end of it. In 16 to 18. He says, do you not know that if you present yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you're slaves to the one that you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or of obedience, which leads to righteousness? And my question with you, who are you obeying? Are you listening to the voice in your head that says, God doesn't love you, you can do it better, you don't need Jesus? Or are you listening to the voice in your head, the voice of the Holy Spirit saying, I've got this, trust me, follow me? Verse 17, thanks be to God that you who were once slaves of sin have become obedient from the heart of the standard to teaching to which you were committed, and having been set free from sin, have become slaves of righteousness. You're slaves of the one that you obey. Either sin, which leads to death, or obedience, which leads to righteousness. So if we're going to follow the Master, here's what that means. Follow means to obey. And like we talked about last week, Jesus came to fulfill the law. And Jesus talked about how the Pharisees and the scribes, they would tithe just, a tenth of their mint and their dill and their cumin. Like, they do that. But they neglected the greater things of the law. And Jesus said they should have done both. And we talked last week how a tithe is 10%. Now, if you're not giving 10%, that's fine. If you're not giving to Discovery, that's fine. But what you need to be doing is giving to God. And you need to be giving, at a starting point, 10%. You can't tithe 3%. You can't tithe $5 if you make more than $50. So you're slaves of either sin or obedience. And I would just encourage you to follow the Master, not your own methods, not your own way, not figure it out on your own. Follow Him. Because when it says, be not wise in your own eyes in Proverbs, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. That word for fear the Lord there is sometimes translated as follow. Follow the Lord. Follow the Lord and turn away from evil. Don't follow your own methods. We're going to make this quick, so I'm just going to give you verse 8 of Proverbs chapter 3. We trust in the Master, not ourselves. We follow the Master, not our methods. And in verse 8, it will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Now, what is this it? This it is this fearing the Lord, this following of the Lord, this obedience. Not fearing your money problems, not fearing, what's going to happen or anything like that. It's fearing the Lord. And it will be healing and it will be refreshing. Why does that matter? Well, because we think we can fix anything. We think if we just change things around, if we just do things better, if we're more committed to our plan, that we'll fix it. The Lord can fix anything. And I'm sure the other one won't show up again because we're running into issues. Yep, it won't. But money won't. The Lord can fix anything, but money won't. So most of you, I'm sure, I like to throw pictures of people up here, see if anybody knows them. Anybody know this guy? You shouldn't. Nope. You didn't even get one name right. But that's okay. I appreciate the guess. This guy's name is Henry Crowell. Does anybody know who that is? Henry Crowell. Just an old guy. For a while, he was president of Moody Bible Institute. But before that, his dad had a lot of money, and his dad died from tuberculosis. And Henry, he also got tuberculosis after his father had died, and he was afraid that he was going to die. I believe he went to hear Dwight L. Moody, who was a early 20th century preacher. And he went to listen to him, and he heard Dwight L. Moody preach. He got saved, and he wanted to do something because he also overcame tuberculosis. And he had all this money, and he wanted to do something, and he went and he prayed. And here's what he prayed. He said, I can't be a preacher, but I can be a really good businessman. God, if you will let me make money, I will use it to your service. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had prayers like that. God, if you'll just let me, like we're getting ready to go to Peru, okay? When there's 4 of us going at about $1,800 a piece, that's a good chunk of change. And so, I was kind of hoping the NBA Finals would last a little bit longer so that I could keep playing HQ and maybe win a bunch of money. But I can't now. Like seriously, I'm like, God, would you just help me guess correctly? Because I don't know all these answers. Okay? Now I'm out like $7,200 because I'm not going to win. So I've prayed things like that. Maybe you have. Like, God, if you'll just let me land this job, I promise I'll honor you with my money. And you're thinking that the money is what's going to help you, but it's God that's actually going to fix things. Well, anyway, Henry started investing. He bought different things up. And he bought this one particular company that you might recognize. And I tell you this because Henry made a lot of money. To the point that he was known as a philanthropist. How much do you think he gave away? To missionaries, to Moody, to churches, and to Christian causes. I don't know the actual number. I don't even know what his net worth was. But Henry lived off of about 30% of what he had. And he gave away 70% of what he made. Because he knew that God would fix the problem, and he could fix the problem, that money wouldn't. And so what was the problem? See, he didn't identify the problem as people don't have enough money. Missionaries don't have... that wasn't the problem. The problem was people don't know Jesus. There are people in China that don't know Jesus. There are people in other parts of this world that do not know Jesus. There are people here that don't know Jesus. And so, as president of Moody Bible Institute, he trained pastors and preachers. He trained evangelists. He trained missionaries. And gave away so much money because money wasn't the problem. God wanted to fix the problem, and he wanted to send out more people. James is one of the books that we've looked at. He's even talked about some of these. If you got your Bible, you can turn to James. James chapter 4, I believe. James chapter 4. Last few verses here. James chapter 4, 1 to 10. So what causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and you do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, and so you fight and quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. And you ask, you do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. Now that didn't apply to Henry. Henry didn't have, and he asked. And he got because he asked with right motives. Verse 4, you adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? And therefore whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Or do you suppose it's to no purpose that the Scripture says he yearns jealously over the Spirit that he has made to dwell in us? But he gives more grace. Therefore it said, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Be wretched, and mourn, and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. In verse 6, he gives more grace. And some of us, we wish that he would just give more money. I was talking with somebody, it was yesterday. Actually, it was. I don't remember who it was now. They were talking about trying to get out of debt. Working extra, working overtime. And at this rate, probably within the next year, year and a half, of no debt. That's impressive. He gives more grace. He gives more grace. Verse 7, submit yourselves, therefore, to God. It's not about who you're trying to please down here. It's not about what you're trying to do. It's not about how much you have. You submit yourselves to God and draw near to God in verse 8, and he will draw near to you. The Lord can fix anything. We can't. Money can't. Your methods can't. So let me just kind of end with this. Do you or have you trusted in the Master? Or do you trust in yourself? Because today, we're having our church picnic. We're doing it out at Lonnie and Bryant's house. Their address is in YouVersion. If you don't have it, get it from me or Bryant or somebody else before you leave so you can punch it into your map and go find it, because it's out at their place. We're going to be grilling burgers and hot dogs and chicken wings, and you guys, bring a side. I don't care if you pick it up at the store. If you want to make something, do that. We have water. If you want something else, you might want to bring, 2 liter. We'll have ice, and we can do that. But there's going to be a couple people there that have trusted in Jesus and put their faith and their hope and trust in Jesus and not themselves. They're not good enough. They're not smart enough. They're not capable enough to save themselves. So they trust in Jesus. And they know that they can only trust in Jesus. So we're going to baptize them. We also know that they're doing what they can to follow the Master. It's not just about trusting the Master. It's about following the Master. It's not doing it their own way. Because I've talked to people before who say, if you ask them, hey, where do you think you're going to go when you die? And a lot of times people will answer, and it's not that weird a question. Like, we think it's weird asking it, but most people will engage with that question. That's what's weird to me. But a lot of times people will say, well, I've lived a pretty good life. I'm a pretty good guy. I've done pretty good things. I think I'll probably go to heaven. Well, no, you won't. Because your way is not the way. You ever told a lie? Yeah. You ever looked at somebody with lust? Yeah. You ever said a naughty word? Taken the Lord's name in vain? Yeah. You ever stolen something? Yeah. Okay. So, kind of by your own admission, you're a lying, thieving adulterer. Good job. And if we're not following the Lord with obedience and fearing the Lord, we will not get to enter into heaven. These guys that we're going to baptize today have put their trust in Jesus. They're doing their best to follow. Now, does that mean we follow perfectly? No. We don't. But we do follow intentionally, and when we get it wrong, there's still forgiveness. He gives grace and more grace. And the last thing where the Lord can fix anything and money won't, whatever mess you've made, whether it has to do with money, relationships. Did any of you see in the news this last week, there was a lady who died, and it was an obituary that made it into the news. Did you guys hear this? Okay. Okay, so let me just kind of tell you, I'll do the best I can to kind of recap the story. So this lady, here's the obituary basically said this. We'll call her Mabel, okay? Mabel passed. She is survived by her 2 children, Bill and Mary. And they're glad she's gone. Because she left them for their dad's brother, and then never even saw them, didn't visit them, even at family occasions did not acknowledge them. The world is better off with her dead. That was the obituary. And I saw a follow-up story where somebody contacted the son and said, why in the world would you put that in there? You don't know the half of it, he said. That was nice. Wow. Maybe you've got relationships like that with people in your family or friends or something like that. Obviously, money's not going to fix it. But did you know that Jesus can fix anything? Doesn't mean that he will. Just because you come to Christ doesn't mean everything gets perfect all of a sudden. If you're jobless, if you're homeless, if you're penniless, and you give your life to Jesus, that doesn't mean suddenly that you are the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. Mm-mm. But Jesus can fix anything. And so whatever relationship problems you have, whatever guilt problems you have, if you've been listening to the voice of the devil telling you that God doesn't love you, you're not good enough, you can't be a Christian until you, and then fill in the blank. If that's what you've been hearing, that's not true. Jesus can fix anything. So just remember, debt equals slavery, slavery equals sin, sin equals death. Obedience is what happens when we manage our money and the things that God has given us, our time, our lives, our relationships. Jesus paid our debts. He paid our sin. He paid and set us free from slavery so that we can walk in life. So, do you trust in Jesus? Now, we've talked about this a million times. Many of you are probably sitting there, yep, I have. My question for you is, what do you need to do to demonstrate it? What do you need to do to demonstrate it? Like me personally, I haven't talked to my wife about this yet, but I feel like... Okay, I'm not going to say what it is. I'm just going to say it's a precursor to a conversation we're going to have. Yes, perhaps. But I feel like God is asking me, and I don't know if it's him or if it's just me, but I feel like the Lord is asking me to put some money in some particular place in a particular direction. At the same time, not towards me and my family as we're going to Peru. That doesn't make sense, and I don't know why. But if I trust him, and that's what he's asking me to do, I'll do it. What is he asking you to do? What is he asking you to do? I don't know what the answer to that is for you. I don't presume to. I'm not going to give you scenarios or anything like that. I'm just going to say, if God is asking you to do something, will you say yes? Will you trust him? Will you follow him? Will you let him fix it? Hopefully we'll see you guys at the picnic and the baptism at 5:30 today. And hey, if he's asking you to get baptized, we got lots of water.